All right. So today we shall talk about assessments in computer science education. And when you look through the two pictures that you have in there, the upper part has to do with a lecturer or a teacher trying to explain things to students in group. So this kind of activity, the teacher is engaging together with students. If you notice very well, you find out it is quite different from what is happening in the second picture down there, in which students are busy writing most likely final exam or a test in a traditional classroom. So these two pictures actually represent two different forms of assessment, okay? In which the center of our lesson today will be on these two forms or two methods of assessment. So assessment is nothing but a systematic process of evaluating and measuring students' learning, performance, and understanding. So the primary purpose of assessment is to judge a learner's performance with a focus on promoting deep and meaningful learning experiences. So this is very important here. When you talk about judging learners' performance, so this is a form of assessment. There are some methods through which you can achieve that. But when you focus on promoting deep and meaningful learning experiences, this is another form of assessment, or there are several forms or several methods of assessment through which you can achieve that. And our topic, our lesson today will be based on these two forms or two methods of assessment. Okay, the first one being the formative assessment. What the teacher was doing initially was actually giving some kind of feedback, some kind of encouraging meaningful learning, some kind of shaping students' understanding, negotiating meanings with the students, okay, in the classroom or in his office or outside of the classroom, as the case may be. So it is a kind of ongoing process, okay? This form of assessment is ongoing. So formative assessment is an ongoing process that aims to provide feedback to students and in which teacher will also learn along the way. Usually we concentrate on the students, but in the real sense, teachers also get some feedback from the students, in which this feedback can be used to shape his teaching. Maybe through interaction with the student, he found out that they have a kind of misconception in what he has taught. He has no choice than to modify his his next lesson, and then bring in the misconception and then treat it before continuing with his lesson. So this is very important. So it's a kind of two-way process. It's dialectic in nature. It works for the teacher as well as work for the student. So it's an ongoing process. And the emphasis so that is why here, if you make any mistake, so the mistake that you make here is for learning. The mistake here is what? Is for learning. It is not to penalize you, unlike in the second form of assessment that we are going to talk about. So it is characterized by emphasis on improvement and growth. Then there are a lot of strategies through which you can do this. So this includes classroom observations, discussions like what is happening here, then low-stake quizzes, and peer and self-assessment. Maybe low-stake here could be something that could be a vocabulary, but saying low-stake, we mean that it's a kind of quiz that at the end of the day, maybe it will amount to 1% of the total score in the exam or in the course. So in this situation, it is low stake, unlike high stake, like 60%, 40% exams. So it also encourages practical application, like homework assignment and project allows students to apply their learning in a practical context. So this form of assessment actually encourages this type of application. All right, good. So what are now the benefits we can derive from formative assessment? There are a lot of benefits through which you can derive, like what is going on in there. The students are brainstorming themselves, so you can get immediate feedback, So formative assessment provides students with immediate feedback. It enables the student to identify their strengths and weaknesses, and it promotes what we call a growth mindset. A growth mindset is the kind of mindset that encourages, I can do it. I just need to put some effort. That is what we call a growth mindset. A kind of mindset that can push you to achieve whatever thing you feel you can achieve in your life. The kind of mindset that will not make you to move back when you face obstacles. That will not make you to give up on time. That will not make you greedy. Yes, for anybody. So this type of mindset is what we call growth mindset. And this is the kind of mindset we encourage our students to develop. No matter the obstacle, no matter the challenges, ASU strike, economic, wherever, you still want to get a good grade. You still want to get this computer science degree, okay, with first class or second class upper, as the case may be. I don't mention to take notes. Student ownership. So the another benefit you can derive from the formative assessment is that you take ownership of what you learn. Look at how the students are discussing right now. At the end of the day, whatever thing they come out, they will be very confident that, yes, I negotiated this, I discussed this, and this is what I got. I know this, I believe in this. So they will take ownership at the end of the day. They will self-regulate what they have learned. The third benefit we can highlight is teacher insights, okay? So our job as teachers now, we need to just provide some kind of insights, and we'll be closer to students. If you give formative assessment a lot, you will be closer to your students. You will know them more because you will interact with them. Unlike you just stay in the front of the classroom and then 2 hours you leave the class, or 45 minutes or 40 minutes in secondary school. With formative assessment, you move around them, you stay with them, you discuss with them one by one, group by group. So you'll be able to give direct insight into whatever thing they are doing, and your intervention is going to help a lot as teachers. Then again, supportive environment is another benefit, because when you create a kind of formative grouping assessment within your classroom, where your students, they have the freedom to speak, they have the freedom to disagree with you, they have the freedom to disagree with themselves, and they see you as their colleagues, their partner in progress, then you provide a kind of environment that is going to be safe from harassment, that's going to be safe from the fear of making mistakes. Okay, so if I make mistake in this particular task, it's not going to affect my grade, and it will be an opportunity for me to learn. So these are the benefits we can highlight. There are still more when we talk about them. So in contrast to formative assessment is what we call this summative assessment. So this one, it happens at the end of the lesson or in the middle of the semester or of the term. And in this particular form of assessment, we are only interested in your grade. We are going to assign scores to whatever thing you get, and that is going to count. In this case, if you make any mistake, the mistake is punishment. It's no longer for you to learn, or at least there is a minimal emphasis on for you to learn. That's what we call the summative assessment. Okay? Some examples of this, we have the high-stake exams, like WAEC or JAM, for instance. These are high-stake exams. JAM is 100%, over 400. If you mix it, that is it. You have to wait for another year. Look at that punishment. It's a big punishment. If you score 100, for instance, and you want to enter Ahmadu Bello University for computer science education, we will not give you admission. You have to wait for another year, or you go to one Nkrumah University, So take note of that. So high-stake exam is an example of a summative assessment. The final year project, for instance, by 400 level now, you will write a project that you are going to submit. So that particular project is graded over 100. Okay, so this is another form of a summative assessment. In that project, your knowledge of computer content will be tested, your knowledge of research methodology will be tested, your knowledge of communication skill, your analysis, and everything will be tested. Then we also have portfolios assessment, so where you showcase a collection of work that you have done. Yeah? So where you showcase a collection of work that you have done. Take notes. So we also have some benefits. You see, when you talk about both summative or formative, there are some benefits. Okay, like people used to say, for everything that has benefit, there must be disadvantage to it. So the same thing, summative is good. I mean, formative is good, it has its benefit. Likewise, summative is not so bad. There are some benefits. What are the benefits? It gives a kind of performance snapshot. We want to know what you're able to achieve after 15 weeks of lecture. So the only form of assessment that can do that for you is summative assessment. Or we want to know, how motivated are you? Okay? Or you want to motivate yourself. When you take a course and you got an A in the course, you'll be motivated that, yes, I can do it. I can make more. That will serve as a motivation for you for the next course. And that is why we encourage releasing first semester result early enough for students to be motivated. But the more you see your result, the more you are motivated. And of course, if you are not doing fine, it will make you to rethink and then add more effort. Especially for direct entry students, you guys that are new to the university, to Ahmadu Bello University in particular, you may be deceived by your NCE, the kind of NCE you went to, and your 15 points or your 14 points in NCE, and feel that, yes, you are brilliant, you can do it. And you are still using the same approaches to learning that you used to use in NCE. You think that those methods will work in ABU. Unfortunately for you, those methods might not work. But the only thing that can prove that to you is your result. You may write the exam and you feel that, yes, I can score 60 over 60 here. This one I can score 30, and then I will get my 70 or my 90 and so on. So, but it's until when you see your result that you know what you're actually capable of. So take note. Then accountability is also something that is very important. You'll be accountable for whatever thing you do. Then with summative assessment, we also make another benefit where we can identify areas for improvement in our curriculum. When you take a course and more than 60% of your students fail the course, you know something is wrong, either with the lecturer or with the curriculum, not with the student. 60% of them cannot just fail a course like that. We are talking of a class of 100 students, and 60 fail the course. What have you taught? Something must be wrong, either from the teacher or from the curriculum. So summative assessment will make us to identify this and make improvement on it. Okay? Take note. So now the next thing will now be, okay, I have formative assessment, I have summative assessment. How can I choose? What can I choose? How can I augment the two? Should I concentrate only on formative or concentrate only on summative? Which type of assessment can I choose? Take note. For you to choose any form of assessment, you need to consider these things. Number one, you need to make sure the assessment is in alignment with your learning outcomes. What are the things you want your student to achieve at the end of your lesson? Then your assessment must be aligned with those things. You need to spare them out one by one. By the end of the lesson, students should be able to write a code on solving quadratic equation, wherever. And then you design your assessment to test if they are able to do what? To write the code. Then you need to consider the student characteristics. You need to understand the fact that you have diverse learners in your classroom. You have weak students, you have strong students. You need to carry everybody along. Don't just design your assessment that will favor only the brilliant students. Okay, and don't make it too cheap that the brilliant student will not feel like attending your class because they feel that either I go to your class or I don't go to your class, your test or your exam is always simple, I will pass. Then you need to look at the time and the resources that you have. If you want to engage in formative assessment, for instance, you need time to plan it. You need time to devote for it in your classroom. You need to make sure the resources are available for students to use. The same thing with summative assessment. Like for instance, now you want to give tests to 600 students, like we have in statistics 301. More than 500, 600 students register for the course. Just imagine we want to give paper-based test, theory. We are going to do calculation with booklet. How many years will it take us to mark? Only 3 lecturers teaching the course. So this is some of the things you are going to consider and feel, okay, instead of you doing that, maybe you convert it to CBT. With CBT to be faster. So you need to consider the time and the resources. Again, you look, if you are converted to CBT, are there available computers? Are there available centers? Are there available network for you to use? So this kind of thing, you put them together before you choose any form of assessment. Take note. So you can maintain a balance. You can strike a balance between formative, maybe you use summative small, formative small, and so on, merge them together to make a whole experience for your students. So this is very, very important when you talk about the assessment methods to choose. Okay. Now, when you now want to design your method of assessment, there is a framework which I'm going to share with you, that whenever you are designing your assessment, you need to consider some features. So we call them the principles of assessment, of designing an effective assessment. But here we call it the framework, assessment design decisions framework. There are 6 things you need to consider if you want to design a framework for assessing your student. Number 1, you need to consider the purpose of your assessment. Is it for the purpose of improvements in what your students have learned, or for the purpose of judging their performance at the end of the day? The purpose of the assessment must be clear enough. Then you need to consider the context in which the assessment is going to take place. You need to define the context. Is it going to be in the classroom? Is it going to be CBT? Is it going to be paper-based? Let me tell you a story here before we proceed. Maybe some of you are aware of the story before, but it's very relevant to what we are talking about. When we talk about assessments, and then you want to consider the context in which the assessment takes place. So the story is about, so this morning we are going to tell the story, like we used to do, story, yes?
Time.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we got a response. So yeah, so the story is about a rabbit and a tortoise. A tortoise, as the case may be. So both of them, they were good friends. Both rabbit and the tortoise, they were both what? Good friends. And then there come a day, they were arguing, the 2 friends were arguing that, okay, I can overcome you in a race. That is, I can run faster than you do. You can imagine tortoise arguing with rabbit that he can overcome him in a race. And the argument was heated up, and they went to the king of the jungle, who is the lion. And then the lion said, okay, there is no argument. Let us put this thing to test. I'm going to set for you a race. Then they make the announcement to the people in the village. Okay. And then the D-Day came. So the rabbit and the tortoise, they started the race. And you know, rabbits can run very fast. But that race happens in the bush, flat land. So the race started, and then rabbits ran so fast to the extent that it gapped the tortoise far away behind. Then rabbit felt like, let me relax a little bit, since this guy is still moving at the speed of snail, you know. And then rabbits decided to sit down, relax a little bit. Unfortunately for rabbit, he slept off. And tortoise, with the small speed of his, saw the rabbit where rabbit was sleeping, overtook rabbit and won the race. Take note of this. What has happened there? Just imagine, both the rabbit and the tortoise, they are 2 students in your classroom. And you can say the ability to run fast, let's say that is the skill to perform in your class. You know, this one is academically sound and this one is not. And you subject them to the same test. But this guy that's academically sound, he was overconfident of what he can do. Instead of him reading the little tips that the teacher gave, he was reading textbook. And unfortunately for him, he failed the test. This is one point. Let's continue with the story. So when rabbit finally woke up, he was not confident. He was not happy. He said, no, it's not possible. It was because I slept off that the king should organize another race for them. Okay, no problem. The king organized another race for them again in the bush, flat land. And this time around, rabbit won the race. 1-1. He didn't sleep. Okay. Then tortoise come again and say, no, I don't agree with this. I'm not satisfied. And then we are going to have another race. But this time around, tortoise suggested to the king, lion, and said, okay, let's have the race in such a way that 50% of the race will be on the land and the remaining 50% of the race will be in the water. Do you get that now? 50% of the race on the land, 50% in the water. Unknowingly to rabbit, he succumbed to that idea and they both engaged in the race. The race started, the rabbit ran very fast and got to the beginning of the river. Unfortunately for rabbit, it cannot swim. Tortoise with his slow speed, he got to the river, swam the river, and won the race. Take note of this. What has happened in this second part of the story? The context of the assessment has been changed. Instead of you giving multiple choice, now you give your students an opportunity to present. This slow learner that to think but can speak very well. So by bringing in presentation in your lesson, you have given him the opportunity to showcase his skill. And before you know what is going on, the slow learner over to be the fast learner. This is another point. Let's go to the end of the story. The end of the story is the fact that, okay, both rabbit and tortoise now come together and say, no, we don't have to. Both of us can win this race together. How? Then the reason tortoise suggested, what we can do is this. You are rabbit, you are faster on the land. Why don't you carry me at the back? Why you are running on the land until you get to the beginning of the river? Why I will also back you through the river to get to the end of the river? And they did the fourth race, and this is what they did. Both of them won. There was no single winner. What is that telling you? It is telling you that the academic sound student and the low or the slow learner among you, if both of you cooperate, both of you cooperate, both of you will win the race. Both of you will be successful in the course. So this last part of the story is very important because it's telling you about cooperation, especially in higher institution. Whatever thing you know, share it with your colleagues so that all of you can do what? Can pass together. There is no point where you pass and all your colleagues failed. After all, this is not primary school where you have prize for first position. Take note. So this is the end of the story. Let's go back to our lesson. So you consider the context of your assessment. The context of your assessment should give opportunity to everybody, should carry everybody along. You don't just do one-way assessment, test, exam. That is not fair. Why don't you include presentation? Why don't you include projects? Why don't you include this so that everybody has opportunity to be carried along? Then you need to make a choice on the task. Which type of task are you going to use? Challenging, relevant, simple, or wherever. Take note. Then interaction. When you are designing your assessment, you need to consider interaction between the teacher and the students. There should be platform where they will both interact, where students can come to you and then you'll be able to clarify their misconceptions. The fifth consideration in assessment design is the feedback process. What will be the feedback process? How are you going to schedule your feedback? It has to be timely, it has to be constructive, and it has to be actionable. Your feedback should be timely. This is the problem. You highlight it and then you give the feedback almost immediately. It should be constructive. You should not castigate your students. Okay, you are dull. You don't know it. That's why you failed. That is not right. What you can just do like this? No, that is not so. Let the students know that it's not stupid. It's just that it doesn't get it this time around. And this is a better way to do it. That is constructive. Then that's to be actionable. The feedback should guide the student to exactly where he's going to improve. Not just giving blanket feedback, pass, fail, 3 over 10, 2 over 10, nothing to improve. Take note. The last consideration is the learning outcomes. You need to make sure that your assessment design is in line with what you set out to teach in the first place. This is very important. I've been saying this repeatedly. Take note. Do not assess what you don't teach, and do not teach what you will not assess. Take note. So in conclusion of this part of the lesson is that effective assessment practices in CSE are what's crucial for promoting deep and meaningful learning experience. So by integrating both formative and summative assessment, you guys can actually provide valuable feedback, monitor your student progress, and ensure that students are meeting the desired learning outcomes. So I'm going to pause a little bit now, and we are going to have some drills. We are going to have some questions where we will reflect on how to solve the problems. Okay, let's have it. The first one here. So now you can unmute yourself because this is a time where you are going to talk. Look at this question. Can someone read this question for us?
Analyze the effectiveness of formative assessments in promoting a growth mindset among computer science students. Provide specific example to support your analysis.
Thank you very much. Now, if you want to, and this question is for everybody now. If you are given this type of question in your test now, by the way, your test is coming in the next 3 weeks. If you are given your test, if you are given this type of question in your test, what are the kind of answers? I mean, what are the key points you are going to include in your answer? How are you going to answer this question in a test or exam?
Formative assessment is like a system where the teacher evaluates the student understanding.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not saying you should answer the question. I just want you to tell me what are the things you are going to include in your answer.
Okay.
What are the things you are going to include, son?
Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. In my own understanding, the effectiveness of formative assessment can be seen in the following step. Like 1, help students to track their progress and make adjustment in the real-time activity.
You are answering the question. I said the key points you are going to include in your answer. Okay, let me do this one for you.
Okay, sir. Let me attempt.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. The key points I suggest, one is identifying the knowledge gaps between the students.
In this, morning, yes, good morning. Yes, under attempt. Okay, let me do this one for you. We have 4 points.
To give out the advantages of this formative assessment. That's the advantages of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key points from my own side.
That's all. Okay. Yeah. If I give you this type of question in the exam, these are the kind of things I'm going to mark. Number 1, definition of formative assessment and growth mindset. I want you to define it. 2, examples of formative assessment methods. Low-stake quizzes, peer assessment, and self-assessment, and so on. Explanation of how immediate feedback and self-reflection contributes to a growth mindset. I want to see this. Lastly, I want to see specific examples, because I mentioned provide specific examples to support your analysis. You know, when you analyze something, you write a lot about it. So you need to give specific examples, such as using classroom observations to identify areas for improvement, which in turn will foster a growth mindset. Because by the time you identify area for improvement and you let the student be aware of it, and then you try to cement it, then before you know what is going on, student will have confidence that yes, I can do it, and then they will enhance their growth mindset. And by the time they do it the second time, now they get it perfectly. So this is the kind of thing we are talking about. So when I give you this type of question in the exam, I expect you to do these 4 things at least. Take note. Another drill. Look at this question. Evaluate the importance of aligning assessment methods with learning outcomes in computer science education. How can misalignment affect student performance and curriculum effectiveness? What are the key points you are going to include if you are given this task? Think about it. Any trial?
Okay, sir. Following the first step you gave, I think the first thing I would do is to define assessment methods.
Mm-hmm.
And
then
give a little note about misalignment.
Okay. What about learning outcomes?
Learning outcomes.
Another additional point from another person? Is my question too tough?
Sir, it's not tough. It's the way we are going to, as in, break it down for you, sir.
Okay. Okay, let's alignment.
When instruction
Yeah.
does not align with curriculum goals, students may feel confused and
put
frustrated,
our
leading
assessments
to
in
motivation and engagement.
They should be
Lack
they
of clarity, inadequate preparation, curriculum
Let's
gaps,
listen to her, please. Now go ahead.
assessments.
So after we finish teaching and everything, we need to have our outcomes. So before you know your outcome, you need to assess the students. So they need you understand the outcome, whether they understand or not. What is the improvement before and after? So your assessment should be aligned with your learning outcome. That's what you are expected. You are expecting your students to learn by the end of the lesson. That's, I think, what I can say.
Yeah, thank you. There are some things that you need to be very careful of when you are attempting this type of question. You first and foremost look at the keywords. You want to address this type of, you look at the keywords. The very first keyword is evaluate. It is not define. It is not list. You see, it is what? Evaluate. Evaluate is at a higher level of cognitive processing. It covers definition, it covers some things in between. That is the first keyword. Aligning assessment methods with learning outcomes. Before you can evaluate this, you need to explain what is assessment method and what is learning outcome. Then what is now the importance of making them to come together? You are through with this part of the question. What is now the implication of not doing that? That is misalignment. Implication on what? On student performance. Implication on what? On curriculum effectiveness. This is how you analyze the question. Now let's have some keywords I put down. You see, give explanation of alignment between assessment methods and what? Learning outcomes. Importance of ensuring assessment measure desired outcomes. Is it knowledge recall? Is it for problem solving? Is it for skill development? Then need to give examples of aligned and misaligned assessment. For instance, a teacher who taught how to code using Java. Then it comes to the assessment. Was asking the student how to code using BASIC. This is not right. There's a misalignment. Okay? So you need to assess your student based on what you taught them. Don't presume that, okay, they have learned this thing in 100 level or in secondary school, and then you want to ask them now. That is not right. It's what you teach at that particular period that you should assess, not what is supposed to know in primary school. Take note. Discussion on the impacts of misalignment on student performance. Can you see it now? I said you need to pick the impact of the implication of misalignment on student performance, then on curriculum effectiveness. And curriculum is not effective if it does not meet the educational goals. And this is the trouble that we are facing now in some part of the, or in almost all the universities in the country. Where the student will be prepared for 4 years, at the end of the day, they will get to the labor market, there will be a mismatch between what they were taught and what they are going to do in the industry. So that means the university is not preparing the student enough to achieve the educational goals, which they will use at the end of the day. So they are failing. And one of the reasons could be this from this misalignment. Take note. More questions to come. We have 2 more. Look at this. Discuss the role of feedback in formative assessment. This one is direct. How can teachers design feedback processes that effectively enhance student learning and engagement? You need to identify what? The keywords. That's the very first thing. Discuss. The word discuss is telling you that you are going to say a lot of things. You are going to define, you are going to give examples, you are going to analyze. Take note. And these are the kind of things I expect you to put into it. You need to explain what is feedback. Importance of it. It has to be timely. Importance of being timely, constructive, and actionable. Then strategies for designing effective feedback processes. What are the strategies? Okay, that is coming from the second question. How can teacher design feedback processes? You need to list the strategies through which a teacher can design feedback processes. Then you give examples, and then you discuss on the impact, because that is the last part of the question. How can the teacher design feedback processes that effectively enhance students' learning and engagement? That will be your last thing you discuss. Take note. The last question on this part is critically, another vocabulary, critically assess. And like I mentioned before in class, when I say critically do something, it means you have to give the pros and the cons. So critically assess the assessment design decisions framework. You remember in the assessment design decision framework, we mentioned 6 things: the purpose, the context, where I told you long story, and some other things. So how can it be applied to create balanced and effective assessment strategies in computer science education? Provide example. You need to explain. Explanation of 6 categories in the framework. Explain them. Critical assessment of the framework. When I say critical, it contains what? Strengths and weaknesses. Do you say it now? This is very important. Application of the framework to CS. That is attempting the second part of the question. How can it be applied to create balanced and effective assessment strategies in computer science education? Discuss on the last thing, discussion on how the framework helps create balanced assessment strategies with examples. So these are the kind of things you should engage yourself when you read through the note. Look at these questions in comparison with your note and see how you can brainstorm and bring out some of these things. Is it okay, everybody? You can unmute yourself to answer. Is it okay, everybody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. So we can
Yes,
go
sir,
to the
it's okay.
second part. Thank you. We can go to the second part of the lesson, which is on rubrics.
Excuse sir, please.
Rubrics? Yes. Go ahead.
On the part where you said application of the framework to computer science education and specific examples for each category. In such cases, how many examples are we supposed to give? Because I believe you specified for us when we're giving our own review questions on our groupings that we need to specify the number of examples we're expecting students to actually give. So how many you from us?
Yeah, thank you very much. In a typical exam, I will restrict you. In a typical exam, I don't give this blank. This just for feedback purpose. In a typical exam, I will restrict you. Give 1 example each, or give 2 examples, and so on. So take note. Is it okay now?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can we proceed?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So rubrics. What is rubrics? Rubrics and scoring criteria for computer science projects. And by our next class, I'm going to bring a rubric to the classroom that you are going to use for your project. In our next class, I will come with your grouping. You will know the group where you belong, and then you will know the lesson you are going to assess. What is now rubric for now? They are very essential tools for evaluating and assessing student work. They provide clear expectations and criteria for teachers and students alike. They are different from marking scheme. They are different from scoring sheets. They are nothing but deep explanation, clear explanation of expectations and criteria that teachers use to judge students. Okay? All right. So, definition of rubrics. A rubric is a scoring tool that outlines specific criteria for evaluating project or assignment. All right? The main objective is to promote objective and consistent assessment. It offers constructive feedback to students. It helps rubric guides instructional decisions and help teachers identify common misconceptions or difficulties faced by students. So they are more or less like a guide through which you assess work, but it is not like pass or fail. It's about, do you meet the objective? If yes, this is your score. If no, this is if you miss it partially. In fact, usually there is no yes or no. It has to do, it is a continuum from the lowest to the highest, from the smallest to the biggest. It is not a yes or no in most cases. So take note. So there are some benefits of using rubrics. One, transparency. If you use a rubric, you design your rubric very well because it is very clear. Everybody will be fairly treated. There's going to be transparent, and you will see. Usually when I give my student a project, I tell them what I'm going to grade. It is not left for you to go and design your project in accordance with the grading criteria, which is the rubrics. So I don't say, go to and do this project without telling you what I'm going to grade. No, I'm going to give you the details of everything. So because rubrics allow us to do that, and it ensures transparency. Number two, it gives a kind of meaningful feedback. Rubrics enable teachers to provide meaningful feedback to support student learning. Because by looking at this, okay, this is what they want me to do, and this is how I can plan my way. Okay, I've achieved the first, like the checklist. I've achieved the first one, tick. The second one, tick. The third one, no, I'm not yet done with this one. Until you tick everything. So it allows for that. Then it allows again for self-assessment. So because you are clear with the criteria, you can even assess yourself. You don't have to wait for the teacher to assess me. Oh, he had already mentioned, when he asks us to reflect on something, it means we should state the definition, we should state the benefit, we should state the disadvantages, we should state how to overcome. I've stated everything in my answer. Oh, yes. Oh, no, I have not. Then you assess yourself. So take note of this. Okay, what about the components of a rubric? So we have the criteria. For every rubric, we have criteria, and criteria represent a clear and specific descriptions of what students need to demonstrate in their project. The criteria, very important. You need to do this functionality. You need to show about clarity. I will bring that very soon. Then the next thing is level of performance. How much you do this? By the way, criteria is the first consideration. The second consideration is level of performance, which is actually explaining the criteria. So levels of performance differentiate between various levels of quality or achievement within each criterion. Then we have the last part of it, descriptors. Now, descriptors, they are explaining level of performance. Descriptors clarify what each level of performance looks like, provide clear descriptions that explain the characteristics and qualities associated with each level. We also have indicators. That one is not here, but in the rubric I'm bringing next week, you will see indicator there. Okay, how can you now design an effective scoring criteria? How can you design a criterion in your rubric? Number one, you need to make sure the criterion or the criteria as the case may be, they align with your learning objectives. Effective scoring criteria must align with the learning outcomes of the project. Number two, it must be clear and specific. Use clear and concise language when you are designing your criteria. It must have comprehensive coverage. Scoring criteria should address all essential aspects of the project. It must be consistent and fair. And then you say, oh, this one I know his name. It's Max now. Give him 10 over 10. Okay, this one I know his name is Zainab now. 10 over 10. No. Or this one I don't know him from anywhere. Just give him 2 over 10. No, you have to be consistent and fair. Then give it has to engage into feedback and improvement. What is not correct? What is not rightly done? What is poorly done? Then there should be space for that. So take note. Now let's look at this example. So this is an example of a rubric for grading programming projects. So for grading programming projects, we have this rubric. This is how it looks like. Now you can see the left part of the table, you have criterion. Okay, and in there, you have functionality, efficiency, and clarity. Level of performance, you have excellent, good, fair, then poor. Then you have descriptor. Remember, a descriptor, they define the level of performance. If you got excellent, it means all required features are implemented and function correctly. under the criterion functionality. If you get good, it means most of the required features are implemented and function correctly, most. If you get fair, it means some of the required features are implemented and function correctly. And if it is poor, few or none of the required features are implemented or function. Take note. This is on functionality, criterion functionality. The second criterion is efficiency. The code is optimized and runs efficiently with minimal resource usage under excellent. And under poor, the code lacks optimization, resulting in poor performance and excessive resource usage. Then clarity. Take note, the last one is another criterion. The code is clear, well-structured, and easy to follow. This is when you have the excellent grading. So this is a kind of, this is an example of a rubric that you can have. And I'm bringing another one that we use to grade the lesson. That one is more relevant to teaching, instructional practices, as the case may be, all right? But that one is not for today. So more notes about the functionality for this particular rubric. So the required feature, the input, and the functionality requirement. These are the things that we need when you describe the functionality as a criterion for grading computer projects. The efficiency. Is the code optimized? Algorithm, is it well designed? Is it scalable? Can you move from small to big? Can you scale from 2 people to 10 people? Can you scale from 10 people to 100 and so on? Scalability. You know, when you write a code, you need to think about this. Can it solve more complex problem? How many data sets can it process? So you need to look about the scalability. What am I going to do for it to be able to deal with large data sets? Take note. Then clarity. What are the considerations you need to give under clarity? The code structure, the comment and the documentation, the variable and the function names. These are some of the things that you are going to come across. I don't know, maybe in some of your courses that you take in physical sciences, they give you some projects, maybe. So you need to look at these things. These are some of the things that your lecturer will grade when they are grading your project work. So take note. If they do, I'm not sure. What about error handling? How are you going to debug the error conditions, the error messages, and then how can you going to recover the error or recover from the errors without crashing your system? So these are some of the things that you need to consider when you are designing the rubrics for programming language or programming project. So we only brought programming here because programming actually encompasses most of the projects you have in computer science department. Most of them, they deal with programming. So that's why this rubric is very important for you to be aware of what it is and how you can use it and how you can meet expectations of the lecturers. So take note. All right, I think, yes, we are almost done. So let's have some drills before we end the class in about 5 minutes again. Drills, the drills that you are considering now, they are based on the rubrics, the topic rubrics. Let's just have the first one. Who is going to read this for us?
Analyze how
to.
Go ahead.
Analyze how the components of a rubric's criteria, level of performance, descriptors, and weighing contribute to effective feedback and student improvement. Use specific example to illustrate your points.
Thank you. And the weighting here, the weighting of the descriptor, I think that was shown in the table, but it was not mentioned in the lesson. So the 4, 5, the 4, 3, 2, 1 that you have there, that is the weighting of the descriptors. So how can you attempt this question? What are the key considerations? Look at the keywords, analyze. It is not defined, it is not explained, it's not missed, but what? Analyze. 1 or 2 attempts. I want to end this class in 5 minutes. Hopefully I'm able to make it. Any attempts? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
I think we have to evaluate the component of rubrics and how it how it improve the performance descriptor of weighting.
Yeah. And to analyze means what? What are the key considerations if you want to analyze? You need to give the definition and the importance of each component of a rubric. Definition first. Analysis is at the higher level. So definition, all these things, discussion, they come underneath. Explanation of how criteria set clear expectations. For example, that of functionality and clarity for the programming project. Discussion on how level of performance show progression, excellent to poor. Description of how the scripter provides detailed feedback, clear code structure, proper documentation. Role of weighting in emphasizing importance, 40%, 30%, 60%, and so on. So take notes. The next question, discuss the potential challenges and limitations of using rubrics for assessing computer science projects. Another way I can frame this question is critically analyze the use of rubrics for assessing computer science projects. I'm saying the same thing. I asked you to discuss potential challenges, but in the exam, I will restrict you. Discuss 5 potential challenges and the corresponding limitations and limitations of using rubrics for assessing computer science projects. How can an educator address these challenges to ensure fair and comprehensive evaluation? I've given you some of the things you can consider there in the notes. And then once you get this slide, you can read through it and then try to compare with the notes. Maybe not with the content, because the content of the slide is a compressed version of the note. The note is bigger than the slide. Take note of that. So when you're giving the slide, don't rely only on the slide. Go back to the note and check what is written there. Okay, the next 2 questions, I'm going to run through them. So compare and contrast the benefit of using rubrics. Design a new criteria. Can you say that? Can you design a new criterion? We've talked about functionality, efficiency, clarity. Can you bring another one like collaboration and testing? So these are some of the things that you can think outside of the box. It's an extension of what you were taught in the classroom, and that shows that you are thinking. So these are some of the considerations you are going to look into when you are attempting this type of question. Okay. All right, so I think we have a convenient place to stop.